Do 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 do. Get a little sip. Let everybody catch up. Let everybody get in here. Good evening, folks. It has been one heck of a day. Now, before I get into the topic, I'll just babble a little bit. Let people file in. This one might be a little different, but let's talk about a couple things. So, let's see. What's the big stuff? There's a couple things I don't want to talk about yet because those are like special spoilers for the members. But new content's coming. It's gonna be really cool. It's stuff I don't do very well. In fact, for everybody who's here early, do me a favor. Blue Hawaiian guppy tank, all right? We got a bunch of guppies that are going to be going to Redfish Bluefish. That's Jason, that he's going to make available on his site. Shortly before they're available on his site, I'll make sure to post in the community tab, just so people know. Try to give you at least like a couple days notice that he's going to have them for sale for the folks that I know have been waiting for an eternity on me to ship fish. So that's new, but I want to add something to that tank. And I want to add some shrimp. Now, I know, I have not had the best success with shrimp lately. Or, for that matter, ever. Not very successful with shrimp. But in doing Neocaridina, right, because they're the easiest. So I want everybody who's in chat right now to do me a favor and vote. And all you're going to do is just put yellow or orange. Because those are the two colors in Neos I'm really thinking about. I'm really leaning on yellow. And they're going to be coming from someone really cool. Let's go put that out there. So someone I might be doing a collab with very soon. So put yellow or orange in chat. I just want to see what you guys like. Keep in mind that's going with the blue guppies, right? So we want blue. I want something a little contrasty, which is why I've chosen those two colors. And I want something a little different than normal cherries. Because if I wanted cherries, I'd probably just go talk to Corvus Oskin, right? Now, the crazy thing is, like, I'm going to start with at least 100. Because that tank's big, right? It's got lots of room. And I want to make sure that colony has a good chance to succeed. So, yeah. my wallet might cry a little, but I'll be supporting a business that I have some serious like for. And, good stuff like that. Man, you guys are going quick. Lorange. Cyclist 23. Nice. So, yeah. It's actually like, just without counting, right? I'm just kind of watching. It's about even, which is the problem because that's how it is in my head, right? If you breed orange with yellow, yeah, I mean, it can slowly divert toward wild or become reds. And no, it's not from Lucas Bretz. I'll tell you that. It's not from Lucas Bretz. It is from someone local in Washington. So there'll be similar water, although most shrimp breeders, they're going to go through and RO and remineralize and all that stuff. Anyway, so let's get on the topic, right? And yeah, make sure they have places to hide. That it's a super planted tank. Like, if you guys have seen it before, there's lots of spots for the shrimp to hide. There's big chunks of cholla wood and all sorts of roots of plants and stuff. It has lots of room to hide, and the guppies stay very top water, right? The adults don't really go very low very often. Mostly the babies stay low. So there's that. Okay, so let's talk about my topic. And the reason why I brought this up is twofold. So first, I was thinking about how things have changed lately. So I've got an interview that I've done, and I have to go through some editing. Okay, and we kind of hit on some things, and it put something in the back of my head, which is talking about trends, right? And shrimp is one of those things that has become super popular in the last 5 years, really, but like 10 years is when it kind of broke into the United States side of the hobby. But the last 5 years is where shrimp has really blown up in the popularity among most aquarium keepers, right? Especially with the the bigger variety of shrimp colors we have now compared to 10 years ago when they were really, you weren't getting a whole lot over here. So I started thinking about it. And, when I was a kid in the 80s, the big thing back then to keep, at least in my area, was discus. Now, part of that is because Seattle water is super soft. It's really inherently easy to keep discus in our water. But the trouble was, like, the filtration requirements and the water change schedule that you needed to keep in order to be successful. And then we get to, like, the 90s, right? And African cichlids were a huge rage in the Seattle area. Like, every shop that I can think of had some amount of African cichlids. And you had tons of dedicated African cichlid stores out here. And you get toward the end of the 90s, and literally like there's like a 10-year window where they were super popular, and then all of a sudden out of nowhere they just fell off the face of the earth in the Seattle area. And we started getting that push of kind of like the dark ages at aquariums, where lots of mom and pop fish stores disappeared and all this problem. And then we eventually get toward, like, nowadays, more and more, it's nano tanks, very heavily planted tanks or aquascape tanks, and we start seeing, like, smaller and smaller nano fish. If you think about it, like, the neon tetra and the cardinal tetra have been around forever, but now we're seeing, like, the neon green rasboras and chili rasboras and all these super tiny fish, right, that are colorful and interesting in planted tanks, and again, we're getting it towards shrimp, which is why I have, like, the shrimp on the thumbnail, right? So the question is this, right? Are trends in the aquarium hobby good or bad? And I think you can argue it both ways, right? So let me explain. I think it's good in that trends can cause people to explore other things. And we can have trends in different ways, like social media influencers, like your YouTubers, can kind of cause trends to occur. And what I mean is this, like, you can have lots of people all ranting and raving about one particular product or one type of fish, and you can all of a sudden see this, like, swing. Like, a great example, even though this is, like, the smallest version of it, is, like, Zenzo Tozawa, right? Tozawa Tanks, which I love Zenzo. He's an awesome dude. I've had an opportunity to hang out with him in person. He's just an absolute gem of a human being. He got his mud skippers, right? And not a lot of people had mud skippers before, as far as, like, the YouTubers, before Zenzo. And then all of a sudden we start seeing this, like, rash of people getting mud skippers and getting really interested in him. All sorts of videos of mud skippers showing up. It created, like, a small trend on YouTube. And that all came from originally Jimmy in Hawaii interviewing someone else, a significantly smaller channel in the grand scheme of things, but still an awesome person. And he had mud skippers and showing off, like, how they eat from his hand and all that stuff, right? And it just kind of created this big craze in the YouTube world. Now, I know lots of people, Candy, like, I had mud skippers before Zenzo. Yeah, I'm talking about just the active YouTubers, right? It created, like, this mini trend on YouTube. But we can see, right, there we go. Awesome. I was hoping you'd be here, Jesse. HC Aqua, what's up? But, like, that video with Jimmy, you showing off yours created, like, a trend among YouTubers, right? It went to Zenzo, and that kind of, like, really blew it up all over the place. To me, I thought it was funny, because I watch YouTube with a really analytical mind. So, like, I watch fellow YouTubers because I get curious what they're doing. And, you'll see, like, these trends in how videos come out sometimes if you pay too much attention, which I pay too much attention. But this can cause good things, right? The good thing is it can open people's minds to things they might not have thought about before. Rainbow fish basically did not exist when I was a kid, right? I never saw rainbow fish in local fish stores in the 80s and 90s when I was young and really looking at, like, fish tanks and really getting into the hobby, right? it wasn't before I came back to the hobby, well after well after I was out of college and all this stuff, that I saw rainbow fish, and now I'm like preach about them constantly, right? And the more that we see rainbow fish kind of spread, we see more people who might have, like, in certain areas that were like African cichlids might be really really easy to keep, like in the Midwest and stuff. We're starting to see more rainbow fish keepers, right? We're seeing slow trends towards certain things. And I think like the aquascaping is the biggest trend, right? The more and more that we see like your green aquas and guys like George Farmer, Yuri, all those guys who show us the absolutely beautiful things you can do with plants and hardscape in a tank, the more that we see like the nano tank and the aquascape tank and kind of creating nature art, right? The more that we see that come into our hobby and people get interested in it. And it might not be something they've ever thought of before until they start to see it slowly spreading around more and more and getting ideas. And if those ideas create a positive thing in the hobby, it opens people's eyes. And eventually you get to like the crazy levels, like Jeff Chambers is mentioning in chat, the IAPLC, where you get the competition aquascaping, which is real crazy. But even just like the lower tier stuff, right? Like, yeah, you got MD Tanks, right? He does some cool stuff. There's lots of YouTubers, but we're seeing like, you can go and then look and like, you'll find these stores like Ocean Aquarium down in San Francisco where they've been doing planted tanks for 30 years or whatever, right? And you see things differently than you might have back, like, say, when I was a kid in the 80s, where it's like everything was plastic, right? You didn't really see these beautiful planted tanks a whole lot in the 80s and 90s. Not commonly. People had them, but they wasn't all over the place. And now we're seeing this prevalence of planted tanks in the freshwater scene. Just like in the saltwater scene, right? We're seeing this huge, I guess you would say, like, burst of different aquacultured fish, as well as like huge rashes of coral that you wouldn't ever see before. But there are negative trends too. Greg in chat just said a perfect one, right? And this has been around forever. I don't think it's necessarily a trend, but it leads to people doing misconceptions about fish, like the goldfish or the beta in like a bowl or a vase, right? And the conception that goes often in people's heads and can create negative things is the thought of putting in something in a very, very small container and thinking that's okay. But maybe more importantly could be things like this. What happens to, let's talk about like on a conservation side. What happens when the trend goes to more and more line-bred fish? Your crazy strains of guppies or glowfish, right? Any of these things that are man-created, not natural. What starts to happen to some of those endangered fish, like the Gudeids and like the Mexican live bearers? Some of these fish that might not be quite as immediately pretty, right? Because maybe they only show their color when they're breeding or only at a certain time of year. What happens to those fish? What's the negative impact when trends take people away from those kind of fish? And we start looking for like, what's the craziest, most colorful thing I can possibly find, instead of like, hey, what's a really cool water fish? Or what's this really neat native fish? Those trends can take us away from perhaps looking into things and doing something that some fish keepers do, which is like they literally keep species alive that are extinct in the wild because of whatever reason it might be, influence from, farming changes or illegal timber farming, gold mining. There's tons of stuff, right? Adding food fish to a system that's not designed to have it, like putting tilapia in some of the lakes in Papua and Papua New Guinea, where a lot of the rainbow fish are, and it's destroying rainbow fish populations. You get stuff like that, or like even other types of tilapia being put into the African lakes, which is ruining African cichlid populations. You have stuff like this. What happens to those fish, right? And there's another great mention in here. Things are being mentioned in chat, like your line-bred fish are more disease prone, right? Paul, thank you so much for that comment, because it's a great thing. I can remember as a kid, guppies were considered bulletproof. You bought guppies because they were things that you knew were going to just like live anywhere and be okay. You could put guppies in a 5-gallon lemonade container meant for like big picnics, and get a little breeder box that was air powered as a filter, and they'll be fine. That's what my dad did as my first fish tank in my bedroom as a kid. But nowadays we think of guppies and it's like, oh no, you have to do X, Y, Z. You need to keep them a little warmer. You got to keep that water nice and hard. Because they've been line bred to certain things, and their ability to handle things are so much more removed from the wild fish they were used to, that they just can't handle those things, right? And sure, there are other like line bred hybrid fish that are able to handle more stuff. You fish like say a flower horn. We generally think of those as relatively durable fish, but they're very mean. They're very aggressive most of the time, so they have to be kept solo. It used to be that you would pack lots of cichlids in a tank during the African cichlid craze in Seattle, because you're going to spread out all that aggression, and then you have this big, colorful, crazy nonsense going on. Well, like one flower horn, which granted, yeah, they're South American based, so it's not the same. I know. But you get something like a flower horn, a hybrid fish, which all of a sudden is significantly more aggressive, and it changes the way that we have to keep fish. We look at that as like, oh no, we keep one in a tank, or we have like a big tank with dividers and we keep them in these divided regions. So that's kind of, I wanted to like put that thought in your head and interact with chat a little bit talking about this stuff, right? Because I think trends are both good and bad in the aquarium world, right? I think that there are things like the necessity to have the next greatest thing. This is like, I think, the trend, and I'm only saying this now because I'm about to shoot a video where you guys will see me absolutely mercilessly rip a product apart. And just a spoiler, I'm gonna start talking about a Sun product, and I'm gonna tear that thing to shreds because it sucks, and it has been claimed by other YouTubers as the killer of a very popular filter that's out there. So you guys who are in the know, you'll know immediately what I'm talking about. I've been testing this thing for a while. It sucks. But a trend has been like producing the cheapest killer of X, right? Instead of just knowing, stay with the quality product that does the job right. I have a Magnum Hot, so hang on the back canister filter, right? This thing's like almost 20 years old now. 25 years. It's bulletproof. The only thing I have to do is change out some filter floss in the thing once in a while if I use filter floss, or just some padding. I have abused the heck out of this thing, and I got it used, and it just doesn't care. It doesn't care. The flow is great. It just sits there and does its job. And this thing's 20 years old. 25. I'm not sure when the person bought it originally, but it's old. And it blows some of the newer filters away. I mean, it doesn't look pretty. It doesn't have neat gadgets and gadgets. But I would legitimately like be happy if someone made that filter again, because it's so reliable, right? It's like, but there's all this like the newest greatest thing, and some of them come out to be very, very good products. The Tidal's a great example. I think the Tidal is a really good filter, but is it so much better that the like now 30-year-old AquaClear is no longer a viable solution? Not really. There's pros and cons to each of them, and it's just kind of your personal opinion. Where my personal opinion leads toward the Tidals, But if you don't like that loud sucking noise, if you're not like absolutely monitoring your water level perfect, you're gonna hate that thing, right? Because it gets real angry and noisy at you. Anyway, so we'll open up to questions. We've had a good little me rambling, and make sure that you do the at Bentley Pasco. It makes it really easy for me to catch questions. There's tons and tons of stuff. We can talk about anything if you want, but if you want to talk about some trend type stuff, we can definitely dive into that. But yeah, if you be looking forward, you folks in chat, I am going to rip that certain filter apart here very, very soon because I have tried all sorts of things to make that thing good, and it just is not. It just is not. Oh, man. So there was one question before JR's that I want to get to. It was asking about trends, and I want to make sure... Streetwise. What are things like in your region? So, depending on how you want to answer that question, you could answer it from the perspective of dealing with human malware, which is to say, I'm doing just fine. Traffic is steadily getting worse and worse again. No longer am I in the blissful time of where it only took me half an hour to get to work, and now it takes me an hour. And eventually it will get to the point of where it takes me about an hour and a half. But that's probably still a ways away. If you want to talk about, like, how things are going as far as fish are concerned, pretty good. I mean, like, I've got some new fish that have shown up, and we're going to talk about those pretty soon. And then I've got some fish that are going out to my friend Jason. That's going to be cool. It's going to make some of my fish available to people, and that's been a long time coming, so people are kind of excited about that, mainly me and Jason, because it's an opportunity to, one, help his business get off the ground, and two, get fish to people who've been waiting way too long. Way too long, frankly. But yeah, I mean, I'm good. I'm always good, man. I'm always doing well. And I got lots of folks to talk to over the internet. Can't go wrong. I guess the only bad thing, like, you'll notice, I'll show it more clearly, I got a couple bandages on my arms. I had a really bad dog fight between two of my pups, and I had to break it up, and my hands suffered the damage for it instead of the dogs getting hurt, which is fine. I would rather me get hurt than the dogs. But yeah, man, I've tried a lot of different stuff to try and break up the fighting that happens, and it seems like it comes out of nowhere. Like, one dog gets triggered from seemingly nothing. They'll play for like an hour and a half and just be fine, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there's just like all-out war occurs within a few seconds, and it's, the things that we have trained our dogs to do to try and break them up when those fights are starting to occur, they just completely ignore them. Usually they're really good about it. Like, we have a break command, and my lady and I, we use clicker style training, and reward style training, and positive reinforcement. But yeah, man, it sucks. Okay, so we'll get to questions. I had a couple of them that I want to slam on. There's like two from JR that I can answer both kind of quickly. So the first one is, should I add Easy Green during my water change when using Prime, or wait 24 hours? Does it matter? So here's how I look at it. I like to use my water change day as a day where I do no fertilization. I personally like doing fertilization outside of the water change day. What I want to do is reset everything and purposely remove a lot of stuff out of the water, give everything in the system a day off, and then re-add. I think the only reason why I do that is I have noticed in my personal experience, it makes algae outbreaks significantly less likely to occur, having that day where everything's removed, giving the plants a break, then starting the next day with my fertilizing. It just happens to have worked really well for me, so that's generally what I suggest. You could do it basically the same time that you put your prime in, you start filling your water up, and right as you get your water close to the top, add your fertilizer. That's also can be just fine. It's a personal choice. I just choose to basically use that day as a day off. That also tends to be the day that I fast my fish, so I'm not feeding my fish on water change day. I'm also not fertilizing my tanks. I kind of stop everything, and the only thing that matters is water changes. And that'll probably change, like, if I ever have like automated water changes, of course that'll change a little bit, where it'll just be a day where I take time off and maybe like manually do larger water changes or something. And then your second question, what would you say is the best scavenger for rainbows? So Corey, Gara, Gudgeon, not Garas. Definitely not Garas. Gudgeons and gobies, I mean, some gudgeons do really, really well because they naturally exist where rainbows exist in Australia, for example. So, like the peacock gudgeon could do well. Emperor gudgeons especially can do well. They live in the same habitats as certain rainbows. What I have found that I actually like the most, cories do okay as long as you get some of the bigger bodied cories. Don't get small cories. And you have to have food specifically for the cories. Because if you don't, unless you overfeed a ton, the cories might have trouble getting food. What I actually really love is loaches, like the yo-yo loach or the zebra loach. They do fantastic with rainbow fish. But if you want to keep snails, you can't have loaches, right? Because the loaches are going to murder all your snails. So you have to have that choice. If you're going to have a more sandy fish tank and you want to keep that sand pretty clean, I would actually look into, if you have a big tank, any of the earth eaters, like your redhead tapajos, why is the actual like scientific name escaping me right now? It's terrible. I should know this because I like these fish a lot. Dean has them. They're gorgeous. They get big though, so you need a bigger tank. But I actually really like. I have some yo-yo loaches in one of my tanks that has sand in it with a group of mixed rainbows, and man, ever since I put them in, they've kept that sand so much cleaner, and they do really well, and they're getting nice and fat, and they look really cool because they got that white and black pattern. It's really offsetting from the rainbows, and they still pop really well. I really, really like mixing loaches with rainbows, and I got that from another local friend who also mixes dwarf chain loaches with a lot of his rainbow tanks and absolutely loves them for doing kind of a pseudo biotope type, like regional biotope as opposed to specific biotope type tank. So there's your option. My suggestions. Little couple comments that I want to go over that are talking about things like Greg mentioned the Magnum Hot was my dream filter when I was a kid. Dude, those things are there's the big hots. There's the hang on the back version of the hot, right? There's the little hot, and there's the bigger canister Magnums. They were all like really, really good. And Ruth Miller's mentioning I have an Eheim Classic canister that I've had for years. Yeah, Eheims, man, they last forever. As long as you take care of them, you can abuse them, but a good Eheim will last you a very, very long time. But getting parts for them can be a pain in the butt. Love titles with aqua clears. All right, now I had another question. I want to get to that thing. Oh, here's I actually just talked about this. Jason Howard, I want to put yo-yo loaches with my rainbows. Is that okay? Yes. Just make sure when you're feeding that some food is getting down to the yo-yo loaches. So the way that I do that is I just overfeed my flake. And it makes sure that a bunch gets to the ground, and I see the yo-yos come out right away because they've just learned, like, those rainbows get at that food pretty quick. We got to get out there, boys. We got to get some food, and we're going to be okay. And then every once in a while, I'll set something in, like a sinking tab type food that they can scavenge off of that the rainbows typically leave alone. And I'll throw that in first, and then I'll start feeding, and the rainbows, like, instantly forget about the tab at the bottom. And it leaves stuff for them to get at. Rapashi is also a really good option. But yeah, no, yo-yo loaches work fantastic. All right. I'm gonna get the super chat from Casey real fast. Then there's a couple questions I'm gonna definitely answer for you guys. Don't worry. Casey's Tanks. First, thank you for the super chat. Never required, but definitely appreciated. Upgrading a 20-gallon long to a 33 long. I like it. I like it. Current stock is 6 rose danios, 12 pendicats planted. Want to add 6 frickatas and hopefully 2 hillstream loaches. So this all sounds really awesome. The thing that I will warn you, make sure you have lids because frickatas will jump. And in the case of hillstream loaches, make sure that you either A, have good flow, or B, more importantly, really good oxygen. Make sure you're really oxygenating your water because hillstream loaches like lots of oxygen in the water. They also don't like it too hot. So don't run your tank too hot. I would say somewhere between 74 and 76 is probably really, really good. Frickatas can actually go a little bit colder. So if you're already in that range, you're fine. But I would say like 74 is like perfect for that particular tank. Because a little bit cooler will make those hillstream loaches happy. But it's still warm enough to make the frickatas happy. Lids so the frickatas don't go like taking the swan dive out of the tank. And good oxygen to make sure those hillstream loaches are happy. I mean, being planted and all that kind of stuff, it's going to help you a ton. Sounds like a really awesome tank. I won't lie. I've actually seen a couple shallower tanks. Like one was a 33 long, the other was an 80, this like crazy ADA shallow tank, and with each one had a different species of pseudomygil in them, and one had furcatas. Ooh, it was nice. It was very, very pretty, and it's still to this day it's a tank that I think about. So, yeah, good choice. You have good taste. All right, the fishy mailman. I hate food trends, but I do like to try new foods. Oh, no, wait. I hate food trends. I do like to try new foods, but we wouldn't do that to a dog or cat. I stick to some of the old staples like Hikari and mix it up when I feel like it. Yeah, no, I can totally understand that. I think for me, when I tend to have trouble finding certain foods is when I look at trying something new. So an example, I really like, I really like this brand here, Tropical, right? They're made in Poland. It's a pretty decent food, and it's not super expensive. A lot like Tetra, where it's good. It's not great, but it's not very expensive. And compared to some of the other cheap foods, it's a much, much better food. But the big thing was there's a lot of different versions of this that were really nice. The Super Vit is specifically what I like. Okay. The flake was really good, but it started becoming really hard to find the flake. I had a local friend that does dry goods that was keeping it until it went onto Amazon, and then she stopped stocking that and chose a different food. She wanted something a little more exclusive and premium. And I actually used that food, and eventually I'll probably talk about it. But it's such a like niche find food that I don't know if it warrants a video, but I use it on the guppies. So you guys tell me if you want that. So when I have trouble finding certain foods, like they make a version of the Sarah Onip tab, but I've been having a lot of trouble finding it. And I was having trouble getting their flake at a good price. It went up in price on Amazon, and to the point of where it was basically the same cost to start buying the krill flake from Extreme from Aquarium Co-op. And this happened right as Aquarium Co-op started actively selling it. I knew kind of ahead of time. I got some spoilers from some people that I won't name so I don't get in trouble about that food, and that they were really liking that particular food. And that for higher protein eating fish, it's a good option. And they knew that I kept rainbows. Rainbows like high protein might be a good option to look at. So that's where I kind of branched out. And now I've liked it so much because the rainbows take to it so well that I've basically dropped caring about trying to find the tropical, and I'll spend basically the difference is like $2 for the large tin of tropical versus the large tin of the extreme krill flake, and I'll just pay it for the krill flake and keep mixing in a couple of the other foods that I like to use that give a little slightly more veg content or a different protein source, like the fluval bug bites, for example. So that's kind of like when I start doing things. If I start having trouble finding a particular food, or I've noticed that like fish aren't taking to it as fast, is when I'll look to try something else to see if I can vary their diet, give them something different. And sometimes what it is like I'll treat it almost like a season. I'll want to run it for a couple months, and then, oh, it's like winter. We'll try something different, like change the mixture of foods that they're getting, maybe a little more veg, a little less protein, something like that. It's something I've noticed as I've kept fish, like giving them a little different variety makes them take to whatever you give them really, really actively. So that's kind of like how I look at stuff, but I totally understand your perspective of like, I don't want to mess it up too much. We don't like throw all sorts of different food at our dogs or cats, right? Right? We just like, we find the one they like and we stick to it, or we find the one that we think is the best for them and we stick to it. EJ fishes. Bentley, have you thought about doing heater reviews? So there's actually someone in my club who has done really, really extensive heater testing, and I might eventually do an interview with him. And he's a really cool guy. He's done all sorts of breeding, breeds some rainbows. That's actually where my first Blahairi came from, was some from him. And he's a real cool dude, but how to put this? I am trying to get away from needing heaters. So the goal is to never review them. I want to get to the point where I don't have to rely on heaters because I don't necessarily like them. I miss like really old school heaters that were like these giant chonky things but you could run them for 20 years. Like I still have an old Ebo Jaeger, right, which is before the Jaeger heater was then bought by Eheim and became the Eheim Jaeger. There was like this company called Ebo. I think that's right. Is that right? Big green ugly thing, right? It is a hideous looking heater. This thing's 30 years old. Still works like a champion. And it sat in a box for like 5 years. And this is some of my old fish stuff that happened to be lying around from when I bought my house and moved here. And my mom moved in with me for a little while, right? We found a box of fish stuff at her house, and one was this Ebo filter, and or the Ebo heater. It still worked like a champ. Absolutely indestructible thing. But it's big and chunky, and people don't like they want things to get smaller and smaller and harder to see and not interfere. But I've almost gotten to a point where like I want that big chunky thing because it doesn't die. And like it doesn't like just switch on permanently. They're just built better. So I guess that's part of why I don't get into them. So I'm really bitter about new age heaters because I think most of them suck. Most of them suck, and I'm trying my damnedest to get away from them. Mike Stambaugh, I'm glad I didn't get a HW 5000 canister. Now I went with another FX4. Oh, spoilerino. Yeah, I mean, I got mine super cheap. I think I paid $125 for it because of some like loophole I found on Amazon that I tried to share with people. And then the more I started testing it, the more I hated it. So, what do you do? Jeff Chambers, I'll handle this. I'd be down to try one of the Awaze ones. So, I talked to someone who was sponsored by Awaze at one point to see if they were willing to send me a filter for testing because they're so expensive. Like to buy an Awaze, like the Biomaster Therm or whatever the heck it is, at one of my local fish stores, the one that actually carries them, like $300. They cost as much as an FX6. And at that point, I would rather buy the FX6. Just because I know the FX6 is really good. And I suppose it could be like, you should test it for the purposes of like, you know, an unbiased review and beating the ever-living heck out of the stupid thing. I mean, it seems like cool tech, but at the same time, like, I don't know that I want to pay that much money just to mess with a canister filter that I'll eventually be getting rid of. You know what I'm saying? All right. I'm gonna try and Geophagus. Try to remember the Earth Eaters. Geophagus. Thank you, Jeff Chambers. I can't believe I couldn't remember that. I'm sitting there like, duh. Just complete brain fart. Oh, man. Rico Stan, what's up, buddy? Just wanted to say thank you for your feedback on Facebook the other day. I'm sure you get hit with tons of these types of questions, so I really appreciate your time. You know, I seriously, this is like opening myself up to get tagged in a bunch of stuff. But when people tag my name somewhere or send me a private message or send me an email, which I prefer email, please, if you're going to message me, my email, I beg you. Just because it's a little easier for me to make sure that I don't forget to respond to you. I do my best to try and respond to people because I'm at a point in YouTube non-fame to where I can still manage responding to, at least reading or responding to as many comments as possible, as much email and messages as possible. But at times, like, I get super busy at work. Like today, I might have unintentionally stirred the pot a little bit and pointed out a problem that somebody then went into a tizzy about. But, it's part of the job, right? So I had this, I was like literally rushing to get out the door to make sure I got here. And I got here with like 15 minutes to spare before start time. Woo, it was close. Joe Kirk mentions hoplocats, loaches, and synodontis with rainbow fish. It's doable. I think that like the synodontis like slightly harder water though than rainbow fish necessarily want. They can still go together, of course. The big thing is just making sure that any of those like scavenger fish or ground dwelling fish, your bottom scratchers, however you want to call them, right? Make sure that they're not too shy. Don't look at like wood cats and stuff like that that hide a ton, because unless you specially feed them, they're never going to get food. The rainbows will get everything. just be aware, okay? Igor Sim, what's up? Bentley, stock ideas for a 48-gallon, heavily planted, quiet Zen tank. Looking for smaller fish that like to hang out and float around. No zoomers, no crazy, no small fish swallowers, no betas. Man, you have some serious requirements there. Rasboras are pretty good because they're not like, they don't zoom around a lot. They'll kind of like lightly shoal. A lot of your tetras, once they're comfortable, will be like that too. Your smaller tetras. Avoid danios. Danios all kind of zip around really fast. Definitely don't do rainbow fish. Rainbow fish are very active swimmers. Although you can train them basically to sit in whatever corner is closest to you and not be very active other than to stare at you and beg. Because they have endless stomachs. You could also look at, there are some barbs that are a little more lazy, like the rosy barb. I wouldn't look at like your tiger barbs or your any of those like super colorful barbs. Definitely don't look at Denison barbs, right? They get huge. What am I trying to think of? There's like the black and red barb, Odessa barb. Don't do Odessa barbs, like they're pretty active, but you could look at something like a rosy barb. It's a little bit bigger, so it might be too big for your small fish. Realistically, you're probably looking at like the exclamation point rasbora, the chili rasbora, the green rasbora, all those like small colorful rasboras that sometimes take a long time to color up. Those are really good options if you're looking for like that more chill small tank. Also, just like don't necessarily count out shrimp. Shrimp are really good at being chill and hanging out in places and just kind of picking at stuff, or like slow, lazy swimming through the water. You can get a lot of cool stuff with shrimp, honestly. Like a shrimp only tank can be really, really enjoyable. Whoa. So I know I'm behind the chat, it jumps. I have to catch up. JT Zamora, what's up? What is your procedure to make a hospital QT tank? Is there any trick to be successful to get the tank up and running? Is throwing seasoned media in the tank enough with a heater? So the way that I in general look at like a hospital tank is I get a fresh, clean tank. I don't want to have one that I run the whole time. I will steal a sponge filter from some other tank and put a fresh sponge in that tank. And usually it's a tank that I have multiple things, or I tend to have small bags of media in a lot of tanks just hidden away, so that I have some seeded media lying around, and then I'll get a small like hang on the back filter and I'll just plunk that media in. It basically kind of instant cycles. You can deal with things like brown algae and stuff like that. Even if you do this, just know that, just keep your light really low and you'll be fine, or no light at all. I actually like no light when it comes to using a quarantine tank. I just want ambient light because it helps the fish settle in a little bit better. And then beyond that, it's just making sure that you observe your fish well. If you're don't put like a bunch of plants and stuff in there. If you need something to block line of sight, this is like the one time where it's good to actually own a couple plastic plants, or just have one fairly hardy plant that can just plop in a bare tank. Floaters do okay, but you can look at something like a Java fern on a piece of rock or something like that, right? You can plonk in. I like using plastic plants when I can in quarantine, although lately I've quarantined in like full planted tanks or like tanks with tons of plants in them that are intended to be long-term homes for these fish. So if I'm going like a pure quarantine and they're going to go into an established tank somewhere else, then yeah, my general goal is a brand new tank. I'm going to take a pre-seeded media. I'm going to plonk that thing in there. And then your heater, if you need heat, and a good sized plastic plant to act as a hiding space for those fish, so that if they want to hide, they have something to hide behind. Usually works really, really well. Especially if you black out the sides and back so that only the front panel is visible. That helps them feel a lot more comfortable and safe because there's not light coming from everywhere. It's all black. There's only one area. You don't even put a light on it. You just let ambient light come through unless you're in a very dark room where there's not a lot of light. Then a very low power light. You don't want a lot of light on them. That helps them adjust and take easier. They're less likely to get stressed, less likely to get disease because all fish carry all sorts of stuff on them all the time. It's just how well that fish is doing as to whether or not they succumb to what's going to be on them. So I hope that helps. Robert Banks, I just want to say thank you very much for everything you do for us hobbyists. I learned so much from you, Corey, Bob Steenfott, Lucas Bratz. Thank you so much. I have 5 tanks because of you guys. So one for each of us, right? No, man. A lot of us, we do this for fun. Or at one point it was purely for fun, and it happened to become business for some of the other ones. I'm in the just for fun category still, but yeah, no, a lot of us just really enjoy doing this, and having comments like that are secretly what makes us all like really, really run our gears, right? That's why we do this. Is we like helping folks. All right, make sure. Stephen P. What's the ideal amount of time to test a heater? Seems like the big test is longevity, maybe a drop test, dry test. So here's the thing. It depends on what you're trying to test in a heater. You can do them for a long period of time. You can do them to see how consistent and accurate they are at holding temperature and their temperature is being right. There's a lot of different things. I don't know that I would drop test glass heaters. That seems like a recipe for failure. And dry testing, yeah, you could do it, but most modern heaters are really not built to handle being dry for very long. So it depends on your goal. It depends on the goal of what you're trying to prove or determine, and then you look at it from there. A couple people who remember the old grain Evo Jaeger heaters. I love those things to death. If I could find more, I would use them. Million and Sons. Thinking of setting up some tubs, used tanks outside with some fertilizer saturated safety zorb for plant nurseries. Any tips, or would there be an easier, more affordable setup? Well, honestly, safety zorb is like one of the cheapest, most effective things you can get. That's part of why I ranted and raved about it, and why it's on my list. Now that I've been better informed by a couple of people who I know are basically real plant gurus, they've been doing plants for a very long time. It's hard not to follow in their footsteps. So, yeah, I think that's the cheapest option, because it's so cheap to buy safety zorb from a Tractor Supply, and then you just saturate it with some fertilizer, or you can get powdered certain things. There's a couple different people who do have different philosophies on how they want to charge it, but there's lots of good ways to do it. And I think that's going to be the cheapest. The biggest thing is making sure that the tubs don't get too cold. So that just depends on where you live. We got a new member, Greg. Welcome, man. Welcome to the Auto Sinkless level. Thanks. I appreciate it. You get access to all the cool emotes now. Which there's more coming. I have to put in the final what to get art from. Basically pictures for the artist. And then that'll get us some new stuff in, I think it's 2 months, because he's really backed up. But that's fine with me, because I love the art style. Omar, what are your thoughts on inline heaters or under gravel heater? Never seen one in person, but have customers who own them. There are several inline heaters that are really, really effective that a lot of people have had great success with. I personally haven't done under gravel because I don't have under gravel systems, but trying to think, did we ever use under gravel heaters when I was a kid? In the 80s and 90s, because undergravel filtration was way more common back then. I don't think we did, because we didn't really do a lot of undergravel filters in my tanks. My dad really believed in either the little breeder box air powered filter for small tanks, or he was a big, he was going to get the big Magnum canister filters back then. If you remember, those were two blocky things in a big clear tube on the outside, right? They look like fancy high tech to him, and he loved them to death. So that tended to be the filtration we used, and I still had some of those, And I didn't keep them because they were like, oh, this is too bulky. I'm never going to need it. And there's a random box of like aquarium stuff that had my Ebo Jaeger in it. And I was like, wow, I should have one of these. I hope it works. Turns out it works like a charm. A little 200-watt indestructible beast. I love that thing. So yeah, I mean, I think the inlines work really well as long as they're built with a canister. Because like you have to think about it, like the Oase Biomaster Therm is basically just an inline heater, right? It's a built-in heater into the canister. It functions in the same way that inline heaters do. A heater's a heater. It should work fine as long as significant water flow is going through there in order to disperse it and not like trigger it to turn itself off or its internal thermometer and all that kind of stuff. It's yeah. Kevin Rosenberg, what's your thoughts on Marineland BioWill filters? They've been around forever. As long as you take the cartridge system out of them, you can keep the BioWheels. They're quaint. I actually have a Penguin 350B BioWheel filter just without the BioWheels in it downstairs on my big rainbow tank. Like they work, and they work for a long time. They're built to last. The big thing is that like they sell the cartridge system with it, and that sucks. Just fill them with like media or sponge appropriately. Do I think they're as good as an AquaClear or a Tidal? No. And that part of that just is designed in how they push water around inside of that filter, the way they're designed. But I still think that for how cheap they can be when you catch them on sale, they're still a really good filter. Because every once in a while you'll catch them on sale and you'll pay like $15 for one or $20 for one, and it's a steal, right? Like I think PetSmart does a sale like once a year, and they end up being dirt cheap around the holidays. I think Bob Steenfott like went and bought like 20 of them or something at one point the last time they went on sale. Like they're good enough, right? I think they're better than like the Aquatop or some of the other like random your Petco PetSmart filters. I would rather have a Marineland filter than those, but I don't think they're as good as like the Tidal or the AquaClear. They're certainly better than basically any product made by Sun. Oh man. Holly Gibbs, I learned the hard way. A faulty heater killed 5 of my African frogs. I'd had them for 3 years. Oh, that hurts. And I lost a whole bunch of green dragon longfin plecos and some super rare rainbows that I got from Lucas Bretz in a trade. So I can kind of feel your pain. I can kind of feel your pain. I had a heater just switch on permanently. Let's drink to that one. Try this random thing from Starbucks. I went and got my lady coffee before I ran in the house, and it was on my way home. It was basically my way to apologize for not getting here early enough to spend a little bit of time with her before stream. All right. Not sure whether that's supposed to be Justo-san or Justo-san, but I'll try. Any thoughts on the Seachem Seche Tidal power filters and hang on the back? I've always used AquaClear, but I'm considering a change given the additional features on the Tidal. I actually have a video specifically about the Tidal filter. I would suggest watching that. They'll give you all my opinions. And there's when Corey did his tour of my place for the Aquarium Co-op, he asked me, given cost is not an option, right? You don't have to worry about that. Would I take the Tidal or the AquaClear? And without hesitation, I told him Tidal. But if you want the full details, check out the video. It'll give you all the reasons why I like that filter more. Try to get... Whoa. Hi, chat. Chat jumped a whole bunch. That means I'm way behind again. Michael Griffiths. Just because I saw this. Hi from Massachusetts, 9:42 for me. What about you? Given the amount of time it's taken, it is now 6:54 for me. I'm in Pacific time, so I'm 3 hours behind you. All right. Bentley, you teach me the most out of any YouTuber I've found. Thanks, Alec. You are the nice. I like your name. It's great. Priscilla late but made it. What's up, Priscilla? All right. We've got a couple more questions I want to get to. We're getting toward the end, so folks, just keep in mind, at Bentley Pasco, easiest way for me to see your questions. I'll do my best to answer whatever I can as we get toward the end of the stream here. JT Zamora, thank you for always answering my questions. You're the GOAT. I'm definitely not the GOAT. there are far better fish people out there than myself, but I will say that I appreciate the flattery. It's always enjoyed, but I'm definitely not the GOAT. There are people who are way better at this stuff than me. Master Breeder Dean is one. When it comes to fish, and when it comes to plants, I would argue that my horticulture awards chairperson, the great Master Roy, as I like to call him, he is an absolute guru when it comes to plants. I mean, he's the guy that I go to for advice every so often. When I'm struggling with something, that's the man I talk to. I'll just tell you something. Kevin Rosenberg, I'm currently running 2 Emperor 400s on my 75, thinking about switching to canister. Eheim Classic I received. Tankus Small Tetras Blackwater, never had canister before. So, you know, a lot of the Eheims don't push crazy flow until you get to like the big like 5-gallon bucket one, right? So I think you're okay. The question is, do you need it? Like, do you actually need the filtration, or is it just a like, I kind of want more flow and I think these fish will do better with more flow, so I want to move to a canister? I would not like completely remove both the hanging backs and just put the canister on. I would like run one hanging back and put the canister on and make sure that it gets plenty of time to get its bacterial culture built up before removing the other canister or either hang on the back. But honestly, if everything's doing healthy in the tank and you're not you're not having to service that like filter every week or something, I think you're doing fine. Like, don't worry about it, right? But I would basically just evaluate, do you need to change? If you don't need to change, you might save that filter for another tank. If you know that you're only ever going to have that one tank and you'd like to use that bigger filter, just keep in mind the servicing on a canister filter is a lot longer. There's a little more work that has to be done, but you don't have to service them as often, right? So there's pros and cons. There's me needing to clear my throat. So yeah, there's stuff like that. So just ask yourself those questions and answer them as honestly as possible. Because like sometimes we always want to go like, I want the new flashy toy, and we're just thinking about that impulse instead of like, it's like the monkey brain deep inside us, right? It's like, I just want the new toy instead of like, do I need the new toy? So that's what I would look at, right? That's how I approach things when I change filtration on tanks. All right, Mike Baker, which you're all the way to the blue shrimp. You've been around for a little while, my friend. Bentley, find a good way to raise Fluval 3.0 a few inches above the tank rim without hanging it from above, like riser mounts. I've been trying. I thought I found one for a while from Printed Reef Solutions, and then I found out it doesn't fit a 40-gallon breeder's lid like it's supposed to. So I've been trying to find somebody, and basically what it comes down to is I'm probably going to have to work with a friend of mine who does 3D printing to basically CAD out a riser that I can get made. And what I might try to do is either find somebody that is willing to print a bunch of them up or find some way to get them made, because Fluval has like a hanging kit, but it's almost never in stock. And no one really makes a good riser for that particular light. And with a lot of tanks, if you raise that thing up like an extra 3 or 4 inches, that light goes from like really, really good to insanely good. And for a while I had risers on a tank until they broke, and because they weren't designed to do what they were doing. But while that light was risen up off the tank, the performance on that light and the plants was so much better. And the difference of a few inches matters so much. There's little like spots that don't do as well, and all this kind of stuff, which is fine because most of the time I make sure that's where the crypts are. But you know, it's little things like that matter a lot, and sometimes it's just easier to work with the light up, right? So I've been trying to figure out how I'm going to do that. And the thing is, my buddy who I know who does 3D printing the most is in the process of moving from Washington to Kentucky. Now, while that doesn't necessarily hurt us, because I'll just mail him one of the things to get it fixed, uh, he's not right here so I can test prototypes quickly and easily, and he's in the process of moving. So that's going to be a long process. This is a guy who I know through work previously. We worked together for a while, and then also we have a mutual hobby. So good friend, but he's got a lot of stuff on his plate. Let's see, Omar. I think consistent temperature throughout the tank is important, and putting the heat with the flow should help with that. Yes. The other thing is just like making sure that the heater alignment is really important when it's inside a tank. So like if you put them in an angle, right, instead of directly up, because if you're directly up, the heat rises, it triggers the thermostat more frequently, and so you're not getting as accurate a temperature. Or if you put it in an angle, that thermostat is paying attention to water that's moving around it as opposed to the heat moving directly upward. The heat moving directly upward is catching the water and moving around. It's just more accurate to do it that way, but sometimes it doesn't look as cool because it's a more visible piece of hardware in the tank. But it's just better long term for not only the heater, but also for accuracy of temperature within a tank. I know we're going to sciencey. We're getting toward the end of the stream. I don't want to go too long because I know that Dr. Black is coming up next. I definitely do not want to cut his stream at all. But we'll answer a couple last questions and then we'll get running away. Are there any specific aquarium plants that you believe every hobbyist should keep at least once? From E. Littles. I mean, I don't... How do you put this? I think there are lots of styles of plants where there's an easy entry point that teaches you certain things. So like Anubias teaches you rhizome plants. So I think you should keep Anubias before you should keep Boos. I think that Java Fern is another good way to learn like the akin of like your Bulbitis style plants, because it is a rhizome, but it's a slightly different style rhizome. It's not the bigger rhizome. It's a much thinner, different kind of rhizome. But it teaches you a lot about epiphyte plants, and it's pretty hardy. There's also a ton of versions of it. So it's kind of just nice to like keep that plant. When it comes to stem plants, I think it's good to keep kind of like the base of each kind of major species. So like Pogostemon stellatus octopus is a really good Pogostemon. Ludwigia repens is a really good Ludwigia. Regular just Rotala rotundifolia, that oftentimes gets called indica, even though it's not actual Rotala indica, is a really nice plant to keep because they each have slightly different leaf textures. They grow a little different in the stem. And it teaches you little things about each of these kind of plants so that you can apply them to a lot of different things in the long term. And that's more how I think about it. I don't think there's like, you have to keep this plant. You must keep this plant. I think it's important to have like the easiest entry-level version of each style of plant to get an understanding of how that plant functions, what kind of water it likes, what kind of light it likes, how it's going to show color, or like when you can trim it or how you can propagate it, all those kind of things. It teaches you the basics of each plant so that you can then explore all the stuff that you really want to mess with. And I think that's the better way the better way to look at it. Cheryl, I would argue that if you aren't looking for how to cycle, my tank level information, I'm trying to make sure I read this correctly to understand what you're saying. But the end is, you're in the top 10 of people I have watched so far. Well, thanks. I appreciate that part. I feel like I'm reading it wrong so that I'm not fully understanding exactly what you're saying. I know there's something I'm missing here. But I appreciate the compliment. Thank you so much. Michael Griffiths, do you have a fish room? I have 2 rooms in my house with fish tanks in them, but not a proper fish room, as you would say. My goal is to eventually turn my garage into my fish room. But as of right now, when I first bought my house, my mom had to move in with me. Okay. She had to leave her old house, and all of her stuff turned into storage in my garage. So my garage is packed with all my mom's stuff from her house, and her house was bigger than my current home. She eventually found a new place, moved to the other side of the state because she found a new job, all this kind of stuff. But then got breast cancer. So I'm not going to make my mom move her stuff when she was fighting breast cancer. That's just being a jerk, right? That ain't right. So they've gotten to a point now where she's like recovering. She's been over a year cancer free now, which is it's good times, right? We're too stubborn to go away yet, but the goal is eventually once we can get that all set up, which we've got to build a storage unit basically for her and all this stuff because of where she lives, to hold all her stuff safely because there's, not room in the house per se for everything, but it's a lot of stuff she wants to keep and maintain until certain other things happen, blah, 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 blah. Long story is basically I need to get her stuff out so that I can then get contractors in to do the work necessary to turn my garage into functioning fish room, because I am not handy whatsoever. I am a very technically minded person. I am not the person who's going to build my own fish room. I'm going to get somebody to do it for me. But luckily I have friends who can do that stuff. So I just pay friends instead. Eventually, yes, I'll have a proper fish room. But as of right now, not really a true fish room. And yet kind of, I guess a fish room. They're just super tiny. Priscilla, you became an upgraded member. What's up? Thank you so much, Priscilla. You're gonna have to get on the Discord now. You can come bug me at like what we call the bat phone, because I respond to it pretty fast. Okay, and I asked her like one more question, and then I really gotta get rolling. Fish room fever. Thank you so much, man. Oh, Sean, talking about 3D printing. I will email you. Some stuff about krill flake. I want to make sure if I don't miss a question, I can get it. Oh man. Yeah, you get the badges come with time, Priscilla, but I still appreciate you. Yeah, Preston John, I love my garage fish room. I want to come to your garage fish room. I'm just gonna put that out there. All right, guys. So I'm not seeing any questions. If I missed one, so just as a heads up, if I missed your question and you need it answered, I'm going to give you my email. Coming in the chat right now. And Candy's posted before, but bentley.pasco@gmail.com. Shoot me an email. I will answer it. It might take me a couple days. I've been working a ton, but I will get to it. And there was a question if I'm going to tour. Okay, there's one question I'll answer. Am I going to tour Redfish Bluefish's store once he opens up? I'm actually going to be out there this weekend. So, yeah, I'll be out there this weekend. I'll be doing a mini tour now and dropping off some fish. It'll be fun. We'll do all that kind of stuff. As always, guys, if you do need to contact me, just shoot me an email. Thank you guys so much for watching. It's been an absolute blast. And stay awesome. Don't forget to go to Dr. Black. All right, check him out. He's a cool dude. Nice Aussie. I like the Australians. They're awesome people. Bye bye.